Everybody, and welcome to this impactful conversation all about getting results with your health and fitness without the need to count calories. So apologies for being a couple of minutes late here, but just getting everything set up and ready to go. Of course, we're using StreamYard, which means that if you have a question, please do ask it as we go, because I can bring it up like so. And you don't need to give StreamYard your permission or anything like that. Of course, if you're watching this back, then this does not apply to you. But if you're watching this live, leave a comment. Let me know that you're here. I can bring the comment up like this. And you don't need to give StreamYard your permission. It'll just come up as Facebook user, which means you'll be anonymous to me right now. But I'll be able to see who you are afterwards. And if there are any questions, you're watching this as a replay and you've got a question, just type it in. And of course, I'll reply to it via a Facebook comment, because that is the joy of, technology. So welcome, everyone. It's really great to have you here. Now, as long as this has worked, my screen should have swapped, and it has, yes. So what are we going to go through? Well, we're going to go through a little bit of a recap of why diets don't work. And if you've watched any of my recent presentations, you'll be well versed on the research that I'll be bringing you to confirm this finding of mine, as I do like to be evidence-based. There are research out there to show people can lose a percentage of their body fat and keep it off long term, which is, again, what we're going to go through, because I am evidence-based. I'm not a quack that sits either side. But I'm going to talk about why the main method of dieting doesn't work. We're going to talk about the 4 main eating skills that you need to use instead. We're going to talk about the goal of eating for health and how to do that without relying on tracking our food, right? And so what that means and how to do it without tracking food. We're going to go through adjusting our food intake as needed, using internal signals again, so without needing to rely on MyFitnessPal. And we're going to go through tracking progress that isn't the weighing scale. And of course, I'll go through why I don't recommend the weighing scales. So why do diets not work? This is one of those very much contested and debated things, but there are pillars of research, right? And with the best research we have available, which is meta-analyses and randomized control trials, which are comparisons of all research, one meta-analysis of 40 studies that looked at long-term weight loss, which involved over 54,000 people, found that dieting was not predictive of losing fat. So statistically, dieting is not associated with weight loss, fat loss in the long term, because what happens most of the time is that people lose the weight and then they gain it all back, or they gain it all back plus more. In 3/4 of these studies, dieting strongly predicted gaining weight rather than losing weight, which means if we were betting on whether or not a person would lose or gain weight in the long term, we'd be safe betting that someone who repeatedly diets over and over again will gain weight. In a 5-year long-term study called Project Eat 2, which was published in the Journal of the American Dietetic Association, it actually showed that dieting predicted binge eating in most participants. And a review in American Psychologist magazine, which was about searching for effective obesity treatments, found that diets are not the answer, showed 2/3 of all people who diet will gain the weight back in 1 year. Nearly all of them will gain it back within 5 years. And 1/3 of those people will gain back more than they lost each time they diet. And dieting, in the most rigid sense, predisposes people to emotional eating, more cravings, and binge eating, which is that cycle of restricting and overeating that a lot of us will probably be, relatable to. Many of us have had that experience or know someone who's had that experience, losing the weight, gaining it back. So although it looks like diets work in the short term, in the long term, they don't. Now, this sounds quite bleak, but as I said, there are a couple of studies that show people can maintain up to 5% of body fat loss if they're coming from a position where they're bigger, but they're looking at behaviors and habits and skills that they're looking at keeping off long term, rather than rigid dieting principles, which are things that we're going to look at in today's presentation as well. But this is known as the dieting cycle of failure. And it might feel like diets do work because you know someone who lost 7 stone in 7 days through doing keto and drinking buttery coffee, or you've maybe lost weight in the past. But if you've put it back on, it's like taking your car to the mechanic only for it to break down a few weeks later. Was it really fixed? Probably not, right? Rigid diets, they produce rules and dichotomous thinking about food, black or white, good or bad, clean or unclean. These things are related to weight loss failure. And another study with 241 people exactly found that those that thought in dichotomous thinking, some foods were good and some food were bad, was linked to weight regain. Another study in 2014 found that rigid dieting predicted weight regain and lower well-being. So we need to get away from rigid diets and move towards more flexible dieting principles, but also more towards skills and habits, and probably taking our focus away from losing weight, which is something I'm going to speak about more in this presentation as well. And by flexible dieting, I don't mean tracking calories, because tracking calories and using MyFitnessPal can be seen as a rigid diet, because again, one study found that calorie counting actually predicted weight gain and rigid dieting and predicted binge eating, which is incredible, right? So the thing that we're trying to escape from actually can predict weight regain, rigid dieting, and binge eating behaviors. Even though tracking calories is known as a flexible dieting tool, it can be seen as a rigid diet, which is why we're looking to move away from it as a tool. So the quickest way to reach a destination is a pirate map, okay? And in nutrition's case, ditching the diets and achieving lifelong health is the goal, right? That's our destination. The pirate map is our fastest route to that destination. And the pirate map for ditching diets, but achieving health, improving health, and achieving great results comes down to 4 main eating skills. And these are things that I got from Josh Hillis's book, which is things I massively agree with as well in terms of skills, particularly with the ones that I've used with my own clients alongside the kind of cognitive behavioral thinking side that I use with clients as well, which is all about changing their thoughts and their beliefs around nutrition, their eating skills, and all the rest of it. But these are the 4 things, right? You've got plating balanced meals most of the time, because again, I'm a guy, I love my food. I'm all about unconditional permission to eat, which is an intuitive eating framework. But plating balanced meals most of the time is part of this pirate map for getting results. And we're thinking, we're going to go through it. Eating every 4 to 6 or 3 to 5 hours. So we could probably say 3 to 6 hours, having one of those balanced meals again, without mindless snacking in between. Noticing the difference between hunger and emotions. That's step 3. And step 4 is eating slowly and stopping when you've actually had enough. And we're going to go through that in more detail. Now, the thing is that this sounds incredibly simple. And if you're anything like former me, you'll be like, well, that's far too simple. It's got to be more complex than that. It's got to be about macro counts, and it's got to be about meal timing, and it's got to be about supplements, and it's got to be some, ridiculous protocol where I've got to eat 7 meals a day at the exact same times, and it's got to be the exact same food. Otherwise, how am I going to get optimum results? But it's not. Right, it is simpler than you think, and it's staying ridiculously consistent with that. And it's so funny because I used to have that mindset around food and nutrition and exercise that it had to be more complex. When I made it simple, I got better results. I'm still, attacked by these same negative thoughts, but in different ways. In marketing and business and all the rest of it. Oh, it has to be more complex, but it's not. The simplest answer is usually the right one, but done with ridiculous amounts of consistency and also tracking the right things. And simple doesn't mean easy either. These things are actually quite difficult to do. So balanced plates is one of those that is brilliant for those of you focusing on achieving lifelong health. It's also brilliant for those of you focusing on muscle building and performance, because when we look at a balanced plate, we've got vegetables and fruits taking up most of the plate. We've got protein there in a quarter of the plate. We've got carbs as the other quarter of the plate, and we've got fats there as a small thing in the middle. So if we're looking at what these foods even mean, your portion of protein is going to be fish, meat, eggs, lower fat dairy, or it's going to be tofu or seitan or textured vegetable protein, or maybe even tempeh for those of you who are more plant-based eaters. Carbohydrates, in this instance, we're not looking at veg or fruit as our carbs. We're looking at rice, pasta, potatoes, and you don't need to worry about the best ones. They're all grand. Higher fiber versions, like brown versions, are great for added fiber, but you get lots of fiber through fruits and vegetables anyway. So again, we don't need to be hung up on this. And you don't need to be hung up on these ratios. This could be a sandwich, it can be a stew, it could be a chili, it could be a paella, it could be a stir fry. It's just thinking about these quantities most of the time, and this is what we would look at as a balanced meal. In terms of the quantity, it's going to be very, very individualized, but I'm going to talk to you about starting with less and adjusting if you need to further down the line of this presentation. But as I mentioned, this is brilliant for those of you focusing on muscle building, because that's a big thing about, oh, how do I get enough protein if I'm not tracking my calories? Well, if you're eating a meal every 3 to 5 hours, and that means you're eating 4 to 5 sort of mini meals or snacks a day, you're getting in enough protein feedings. The science for protein feedings for muscle gain is having 4 to 6 feedings a day every 3 to 5 hours, and having roughly, well, I don't need to go really into the science of like the amount of leucine and stuff like that. If you have 1 to 2 palm-sized portions of protein, or again, your quarter of your plate with protein, that many times a day, you're going to be getting enough protein in throughout the day to gain muscle. You don't need to worry too much about that. You can supplement with an extra shake and some creatine for sure, but you don't need to worry too much about that if you're following that. Eating slowly is the key to everything, right? Remove distractions, put your cutlery down between bites. There is good research to show that eating without screens doesn't just have you eat less meal in that moment, but it also helps you eat less in subsequent meals because you feel more full. You notice your fullness better. There's a great research study that was done on the size of plates and the size of cutlery to show that if you use smaller ones, you eat less. And so if you're considering intentional fat loss right now, starting with smaller portions of your main meals, eating them slowly, and then waiting 10 minutes before you get seconds is a fantastic way to lower the quantity of your food without tracking calories and without getting, ridiculously hat up on how much you're eating. Eat slow, stop when you had enough food. If you've got food left over, put it away for another time. Have it as a snack later, have it as a second meal, give it to someone else, or even throw it away. I know that food wastage is a big thing, so the first 3 are the preferred, but you don't need to finish your plate. That's a belief that's come from previous generations. You don't need to follow that belief yourself. Eating every 3 to 5 or 4 to 6 hours. If you're hungry as fuck before dinner, you're probably missing this part. People have too much of a gap between lunch and dinner, 6, 7, 8 hours or so usually. Having an intentional snack in the middle of the afternoon is a great thing to do. People ask me, well, what should my snack look like? Why can't it look like this, but just a bit smaller? Have a bit of yogurt, have a bit of fruit, have a bit of biscuit, have a small amount of chocolate with that if you'd like to. That's absolutely fine. We need to get rid of really rigid, restrictive diets, trying to lose 1 million stone in 2 weeks and eating only salads and no chocolate. We can have a snack with some dairy, some chocolate, some nuts. Perfectly fine. Bit of fruit, bit of dairy, bit of nuts. Bang on. What a great snack that would be in the middle of the afternoon. And it would put you on till dinner, and it would stop you mindlessly eating all of the stuff while you're cooking your dinner. Because mindless eating, mindless snacking, sabotage snacking, those are the things that are holding people back, right? Not usually the main meals, unless you do want to increase your protein and fruit and veg consumption. Of course, that's a great habit to do to build towards health. Again, it's simple. It's not easy. But eating every 4 to 6 hours, this matches our body's natural hunger and digestion cycle anyway. And if you just mindlessly snack throughout the day, you're never really feeling satisfied because you haven't sat down and had a proper meal. So mindlessly grazing throughout the day is associated with greater overall caloric intake. If you sit down, even for 5 to 10 minutes, have a meal, distraction-free, putting your cutlery down between bites, lasting every 3 to 5 or 4 to 6 hours, depending on your own hunger and appetite, is perfectly fine. And if you want, some more guidance on this, I'm going to talk more about feeling fullness later in this presentation, but I've got a great worksheet which helps you with scales of hunger, scales of fullness, and knowing when you've had enough, that's going to help you last this time. Also, when you first start looking at skills, it's about practice, right? And you might not get this right. You might be hungry sooner, which means that you just ate a little bit too little at that last meal. You might not be hungry for ages, which means you might have been too full in that last meal. But you adjust these things over time, which I'm getting ahead of myself, but we don't need to be perfect from day dot, which is what stops a lot of us, right? We try to be perfect from day one. When we're not, we give it up. We think we need a different method, and actually we just need to keep practicing. Does each meal need to look the same, or is a bigger dinner or lunch okay? Find what works best for you. I like to have a reasonably small breakfast. I probably then have lunch a few hours after. My lunch may be a bit bigger, or again a little bit smaller. Have an intentional snack in the afternoon. Dinner might be a bit bigger, but again, I try to rely on my hunger and appetite in that time. I work out around mid-morning or midday usually, which means then it's probably normal for me to be a bit hungrier in the afternoon, in the evening. So find what works for you. The meals don't need to be the same size, just the principle of keeping them balanced. But again, that's just for most meals. Sometimes it's totally fine to have a croissant or some cereal for breakfast if it's in line with your values as a person and you really want it and enjoy it. And that's going to help you honor that craving and not binge on food later. So I hope that helps. So hunger or emotion, learning which one is quite enjoyable to do, but it is difficult work as well, right? People who eat when actually hungry have a lower body fat than people who don't pay attention to hunger at all. Eating in response to hunger, is associated with a lower overall caloric intake, but we need to get used to recognizing true hunger versus recognizing emotions. Okay, so paying attention to hunger signals has wide-ranging well-being benefits, and learning to eat based on actual hunger rather than being based on an app is related to a better body acceptance, better self-esteem, less depression, lower anxiety, and better body satisfaction overall. So noticing your natural hunger cues is part of the learning of noticing what isn't hunger, like stress, cravings, or emotions. So if you notice that you have a rumbling in the stomach, that it's come upon gradually, that it's true hunger, you'll be better able to tell when it's actually stress, cravings, or emotions. And in that sense, it's dealing with the emotion in a different manner. And that's beyond the scope of this presentation, because we'd be here for hours, talking about emotional eating and stress eating and diffusion and all the rest of it. So if you want to talk more about that, or I've got a 10-minute video on that actually. So if you want that, then, send me a direct message, let me know, and I can send you a training on emotional eating. But we need to get used to noticing emotions versus noticing hunger, because noticing hunger is actually one of the most effective tools against emotional eating. And it's also one of the most effective tools to eat the right amount for our body. When you're hungry, you should eat. It's your body telling you to eat. Of course, following this balanced plate and having more protein and having more veg and more fiber means that our meals are more satisfactory and will be fuller for longer. But when you are hungry, it is your body's signal of telling you to eat. And for people who perform regularly, perform a lot of weightlifting and or cardiovascular activity, a lot of people in those arenas are trying to lose weight to improve their sport. But actually, improving your sport comes down to fueling yourself adequately so that your performance is good and your adaptation to exercise is good. And then you can perform even better. And if your body's hungry, it's telling you that you need fuel, you need food. And learning to honor our hunger is great, because it's not eating when hungry that's stopping us, it's eating when not hungry that's stopping us. And that's where this skill is really, really powerful. So in 7 steps, intentional fat loss comes down to eating a meal when hungry, eating mostly balanced meals, stopping when satisfied rather than overfull, not snacking between meals due to boredom or procrastination, but having an intentional snack when you are hungry, not having fun food because of emotions or stress, using healthy non-food ways to cope with emotions and stress, as well as having a serving of fun food every now and then, because again, unconditional permission to eat, having a donut, having a slice of cake, having a bit of chocolate, all of this is part of having a balanced approach to health and fitness. If we don't do those things, we end up getting worse cravings because we're restricting ourselves. And that's when we get into the binge and restrict pattern. Now, if you've gone a long time banning fun foods, donuts, cookies, crisps, and thinking that you're bad when you eat them, you do need to go through a phase of accepting these foods again, which means that you might eat more of them at first, which scares a lot of people because they're trying to lose body fat. But if you don't go through that phase first, you'll never be able to get beyond it to a point where you accept those foods and you can have them when you truly want to, but you can also say no to them without thinking like you're restricting them. And that blows people's minds. But it's that idea of working on your relationship with food first. And actually, our next presentation next month is going to be all about improving our relationship with food. So make sure you stay in the group if you want to catch that presentation. So one of the big objections is, well, does this really work? Like I've tried this before, didn't work for me. And I talked about being relentlessly consistent. I also talked about the difference of practicing skills and, getting it right some of the time, getting it wrong some of the time, adjusting, some days and weeks being better than others. And that's just the same as if you were learning a language or learning an instrument, which is the best way to look at food and workouts. But to give you some evidence, again, I've got clients who have intentionally lost fat and kept it off as far as to this date, to my knowledge. Research shows that people who eat when hungry have a lower body fat and body weight than people who don't pay attention to their hunger. Eating in response to hunger is associated with that lower caloric intake, as we've already discussed before. So clearly my notes were on an earlier slide. So yes, it does. It does really work, both in research and in kind of my colloquial practice. With feeling your fullness signal, this is something that people struggle with because they're used to having an app to tell them when to eat, how much of that food to eat, and when they've had enough food, right? You're using and I was the same. I used my Fitness Pal to give me my daily caloric intake, maybe even my meal by meal caloric intake, because I was that obsessed with trying to be perfect. And then thinking, well, I've had enough food because I've had enough macros, or being like, well, I'm not hungry, but I've still got calories left, so I'm going to eat them. Feeling your fullness signal takes time. It's normal for your body to want more and less food on different days. And this is something that sabotages people because they either eat the same amount of low calorie food all week and then massively overeat on the weekend because of all the food that they've banned themselves through the week. Or people go over their calories on a weekday and think, well, I've fucked it, so I might as well sabotage myself even more, not realizing that your body will be hungrier some days and not hungry other days. And that doesn't always correlate to the amount of activity and exercise that you've done that day, although it can. But feeling your fullness signal comes down to slowing down your food, getting used to knowing the difference between hunger and satiety. So hunger is the rumbling of the stomach. Satiety is the lack of that rumbling. Hunger is the emptiness in the stomach. Satiety is the fact that your stomach feels satisfied and full without being overly distended. But know that bloating throughout the day is natural because you're eating food. You're eating food, you're filling your stomach with food. Your stomach gives off gases, particularly when it ferments carbohydrates, which provides a bloated feeling. Having bloat isn't a bad thing, but this is often why people feel like juice diets and low carb diets are better for them because they don't have bloat. That's just because you're not fermenting carbohydrates in your body. It's not because anything wrong is happening. It's actually because your body's doing the right thing it needs to. But start with less food than you think you need. Slow down your eating. Wait 10 minutes before getting more. One of the best things you can do for your family at meal times is serving everything in the middle of the dinner table and just allowing people to take what they fancy, because then you're letting people serve their own portion sizes. They're taking the amount they feel they need, and they're always able to get more, which gives you that abundance mindset of food, which stops the restrictive mindset of food. And it also allows you to serve what you deem appropriate to yourself that meal, rather than having to finish your plate if you don't need to. So having something sweet, as I've said a couple times today, is totally normal and a human thing to do. People say to me, "What do I do when I want something sweet after a meal?" Have something sweet. Like, one of the eating for health statistics is lowering added sugars. Yes, because they're not amazing for us in a dietary pattern most of the time. Obviously, there's nothing unhealthy apart from when it's in excess. But having something sweet after a meal is totally normal. And it's totally normal for you to feel that way after an evening meal. And it's totally okay to have some chocolate, some biscuits, some cake in a small manner that fits your goals and values. Having that something small and having it as, 10% or less of your food intake for a day, it's not going to affect your health and it's not going to affect your overall caloric intake. Again, it's the mindless snacking and the mindless overeating from eating portion sizes that are far too large that get in the way. And if you have something sweet that's a bit larger than normal, your body will reflect that in terms of its hunger and satisfaction. And you can then eat less in another meal by listening to your body, not by massively restricting. And as I said before, some days you'll eat more, some days you'll eat less, but getting used to really listening to your body, whether you truly want that food or whether it's because of stress and emotion, it's a really, really great distinction to make. But we do often want the foods we restrict more. So if you ever feel addicted to food or that you are compulsively eating food, it's probably because you see that food as bad and you're restricting it, and that's what's causing that overeating. So you need to go through that process of accepting that food as okay to eat. So eating for health, because again, this is something that comes up like, well, how do I eat intuitively and eat for health? Well, we're taking some frameworks from intuitive eating because it is a weight neutral paradigm at heart, intuitive eating, in terms of, and I prefer to be weight neutral as well. I find fat loss and weight loss are different things, which is, again, something I'm going to talk about. But we're taking the principles of eating for hunger and satisfaction and eating for health is an intuitive principle as well, right? People think that intuitive eating is just about eating whatever you want all the time. It's not. It's about having unconditional permission to eat the food. Yes. It's about making peace with food. Yes. It's about rejecting diet mentality. Yes. But parts of intuitive eating are also honor your hunger, honor your emotions with kindness, as well as honor your health with gentle nutrition. And what that looks like is lowering our saturated fat intake and raising our unsaturated fat intake. Because in the Western population in particular, we eat a lot of butter, we eat a lot of meat, we eat a lot of dairy, but we don't eat a lot of nuts and seeds and oily fish, which is what they do in the Mediterranean continents, which is why they've got such great health profiles. So if we lower our saturated fat intake, particularly trans fats intake from sort of fun foods, and eat more unsaturated fats, that's a great health decision. Eating more fibrous foods and plants is a great decision for health. Lowering our added sugars is a great decision for health. Again, not from a place of restriction, but from a place of eating more protein and fibrous foods and plants. It'll knock those things out anyway. And eating a diverse range of foods, so not eating the same food day in, day out, not eating the same food for each meal, but having a variety of meats, having a variety of fish, having a variety of plant foods, having a variety of carbohydrates and fats. That is part of a healthy diet because then you're getting a wide range of nutrients. People who try to eat clean or eat the same food every day and follow a rigid meal plan, again, something I have done in my former life, you're not as healthy as other people because your nutrient range is not as diverse. And that is just a plain fact. Adjust your food as needed. These are beginning frameworks. If you find yourself really hungry, then adjust your portion size up. If you find yourself with low energy, then have more carbohydrates and get a better night's kip. Your body is the cleverest thing in your life. You just need to get used to listening to it, right? We've got trackers for steps and sleep and, for HRV and training recovery and tell me how much protein to eat exactly and how many carbs to eat exactly each day. Your body does different things every day, right? It's got a different amount of metabolic processes to go through. It digests a different amount of food, does a different amount of daily steps and activity and exercise each day. Your body knows if it needs an extra kip or an extra bit of sleep or an extra bit of carbohydrate, but you just need to get used to listening to it and adjusting your results as needed. And that's where tracking progress comes in, right? And when I say tracking reps completed, I mean as in you're not measuring the scale weight, you're not measuring your measurements per se, because your body doesn't make progress in a linear fashion. And some people will lose weight while other people don't. Some people's measurements will change and other people don't. Doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's just that your body's different, right? If you and I ate the same food and exercised the same, we'd still look completely different because our bodies are going to react differently. But reps comes down to not just reps in the gym, which is, obviously another great activity for health is going to the gym, but in terms of our skill practice, how often am I having a balanced meal? How often am I eating when hungry and stopping when full? How often am I noticing and naming my emotions? How often am I following eating a meal every 3 to 5 hours? How often am I mindfully snacking? You can track these things with the amount of times you practice per meal or per day, because those things are inside of your control. Action steps are inside of your control. The results aren't. The results aren't in your control. But also, you can track subjective levels of energy. You can say, right, well, how much energy do I feel today? How much hunger do I feel today? How much sleep did I have last night? How well do I feel? How good did I feel in the gym? What were my gym results? All of this is data that you can track, because then it gives you a picture of how your body's feeling, and it's got nothing to do with the numbers you've eaten that day on MyFitnessPal. You can track exercise sessions, you can track steps, and you can track body measurements if you want to, but it's just doing these things for the right reasons and knowing the faults in the data, right? Measurements, your measurements are only the measurements that you take. And they're only as good as how accurate you are at taking measurements, because your body can change in many different ways that you're not measuring. Tracking steps, yeah, cool, they're in your control. And moving more is a great habit for health, but see it as a habit for health. See going on those extra walks and those extra steps as a thing that moves your body, that you enjoy, not about, I need to get my step count up because I need to lose fat. If you don't want to go for a walk, but you'd much rather go swimming or go for a bike ride or go play a hobby or some sport, then do that. Do things that your body are fun with, and your Fitbit or Garmin might not track them as steps, but you're still moving your body, and that's great. Yeah, track your exercise sessions. That's a great thing to do. Tracking going to the gym and what weight you're lifting is a great part of measuring progress and progression. But think about our mindset about exercise. It's like, right, okay, I'm going to go to the gym. Some days I lift not as much, other days I lift more, but I'm going to track my progress and try and make incremental gains. We need to do the same thing with our nutrition. Right, I'm going to start with these small skills. I'm going to track my progress in these skills. I'm going to try to make incremental progress with my skills. And I'm focusing on skills that are inside of my control rather than getting lost with things that are outside of my control. And I hope that makes sense. So in terms of the weighing scales, personally, I don't really recommend them anymore, because your body can lose fat without the scale weight changing. The scales, even if you're tracking the average, a lot of people judge their success by the number on the scale, whether it's gone up or that it's gone down. They celebrate when it goes down, they cry when it goes up, even if they're tracking the average over time. So a lot of the time now, I just don't even recommend them. If you're putting muscle on because you're going to the gym and you're eating protein, the scale weight's not going to dictate very much either, because if you've lost fat and gained muscle, your scale weight might go the same, it might even go up, but you're not, your worth is not dictated by the amount of body fat you have or what the scale weight says anyway. And if you think it does, then that's the deeper work to do. If you want to lose intentional body fat from a place of like feeling more healthy and feeling confident, that is fine. But working on body image alongside that does help, because otherwise you're always seeking a number. You're always seeking a lower number and a lower body fat number. Go on to my recent Instagram posts for about, focusing on a solid number. I used to be so obsessed with being 85 kilos that I completely lost the fact that I was lean enough anyway. And I was dieting all the time, trying to get to this magic number that was in my head that my body didn't need to be at. And so please do take away the fact that you can challenge the thought in your head that you need to be a certain body weight. You don't need to be a certain body weight. You don't need to be a certain body weight to fit into a BMI category. I think I'm in obese category 1 in the BMI. I might be overweight or obese. I haven't weighed myself in a long time, so I don't know. but my body fat levels aren't at a place where I need to worry about my health. I exercise 4 to 6 times a week, plus play sport, plus go on lots of walks with my dogs, plus eat plenty of fruits and vegetables. My blood panels are fine. The markers of health are blood work mostly, and the amount of movement and things that you do. If your blood work is off, then there are changes to be made. But if there aren't, well, you are going to be all right. Okay, so personally, I don't recommend the scales. You don't need to be a certain body weight. If you want to lose intentional body fat, that's fine. But you don't need to measure the scales, because if the scales don't change, you think nothing's working. But that's like me trying to PB my bench press or deadlift every week. It's not going to happen. But over time, I'm going to be a fuck ton stronger if I stick to the basic principles over time. But trying to lose weight all the time, trying to lose weight every week, and giving up when you don't lose weight in a week, that's holding you back. So in summary, diets don't work statistically. Working on eating skills is the key to achieving lifelong health and a body composition that we're happy with, but also self-compassion, better body image, better emotional regulation. We're going to work on these things in other presentations. Developing self-compassion for long-term progress is key. You're human. Some days you'll feel good. Some days you won't feel so good. Some days you'll do amazing. Some days you won't do so amazing. But you're human. You make mistakes. You crack on regardless. If you're a dick to yourself all the time, you're more likely to start and stop all the time. Adjust your results based on internal feedback. How hungry you feel, how much energy you feel like having, how good you feel on a day-to-day basis. Track progress that's important to you based on items inside your control. How often are you having balanced meals? How often are you eating when hungry? How often are you eating slowly and stopping when satisfied? These things you can control. You can't control what your body does in reaction to them. And you definitely can't control the number on the scale. So you're probably better off throwing the scales away. So that's my presentation. Thank you for those who watched it live. If you're watching this on a desktop, scan this QR code. You'll be taken to my application process for one-to-one coaching. If you want more help, then there are some spots available right now. If you're on your phone watching this, of course, you can't scan this QR code, but you can DM me if you'd like the application link, and I will get back to you on that. Do you recommend measuring? Again, measurements are only as good as your measurements. So yeah, you can do if you're accurate at doing it and you do it at the exact same spot. I got taught to mark up my clients, and based on anthropology, how long, how the distance from shoulder to here, mark the, to get the exact same spot every time. But you're only measuring those spots. So your body might lose fat in other areas that you're not measuring. If you take your measurements as your only marker of progress, what if you've missed some progress? And yet weighing yourself is a really hard concept to stop. But again, think about the amount of things that go into body weight. Stress-related water retention, carb-related water retention, food bloating, food in the stomach, the amount of poo in your gut, the amount of blood you've got that day, muscle mass and fat mass and bone density, all of these things. There's just so much that goes into it. And if you're gaining muscle, I don't really see the point. Progress pictures are probably the best thing to take, but to do them every maybe 4 weeks, maybe every 8 weeks, because again, your body doesn't make linear progress. You want changes over time rather than, fuck me, I've not seen any progress this week, therefore nothing is happening. That's not a good look, right? Just like the deadlift concept, I'm going to do deadlifts 3 times a week for the next 6 to 12 months, then my deadlift is probably going to go up. But if I try to PB my deadlift every week, 1, I'm not following strength principles because I'm just maxing out every week. 2, I'm not going to see results because I'm just maxing out every week. So 1, I'm doing the wrong thing because I'm trying to max out every week. And then 2, I'm focusing on trying to max out every week. So it's just the wrong thing. Okay. So cool. I'm glad that helped. So thank you for those of you that watched it live. Get that QR code scanned if you're interested in more help. I focus on a combination of amazingly well-written training programs through the knowledge that I have in personalizing training programs and periodized progression and exercise that you actually enjoy. CBT, so cognitive behavioral therapy, so changing your thought patterns and your beliefs around food, exercise, and yourself in order to help you take new actions, and motivational interviewing, which is a counseling process that's designed to build internal motivation within the client, helping them again take action with the habits that they want to build for the goals that they have around their health and fitness. So if you want to drop rigid dieting, get out of the diet mentality, and escape feeling the need to track, weigh, and measure everything to the gram, so get out of disordered eating habits and towards normal eating habits while improving your health and body composition, then I am your bloke. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for being here. If you're watching this back and you've got questions, comment below and I'll get back to you very soon. Cheers, team.